Oakland's black population is also shrinking. Yeah. And that is, social scientists are looking at it one of these days. Maybe somebody will come up with something near the truth. Oakland's, of course, had to do with the housing pattern, the loss of homes, people moving out to the suburbs. And now realizing the value of that without knowing that the suburbs are not all they're chalked up to.
The mention of Oakland brings me to two related questions about some of the things that have been happening in Oakland recently. Both of you have covered in different ways riots and public protests. And so these two questions are really asking about your opinions of the role of protest in today's political world. And of course, Occupy Oakland has had some particular results recently, should we say, or non-results. Repercussions.
Well, for me, I'll just say, when I go out a lot, I take quite often a DVD with me. And one of the things that I put up first are the Berkeley days of protest and the protest at San Francisco State. And I pulled that up because I wanted to know if it was really as sharp as it was in my memory. And when I looked at the scene of a military helicopter swooping over Sproul Plaza with tear gas, with pepper spray in it, and the National Guard, on the campus, surrounding the plaza with rifles, with bayonets on them. Then I was taken aback at first because I didn't realize that it was quite that. A war. And so today, there's a different kind of protest. There's still a degree of brutality, but it doesn't mirror what we've lived through. Now, what is that saying? I don't know. I guess that the other lasting memory that I carry forever is the sound of kids getting their heads hit with sticks. And the determination of them, though, to come back the next day and try again. I don't know in today's society whether it lends itself to instilling a spirit to come back the next day and try it again because you believe in the American dream, so much so that you're willing to risk everything. The dream has become somewhat diluted based upon the business that I'm in, television. I better stop there.
I mean, not at all. I mean, a collage of ideas come to me, first of all, that as I thought about that time when I was reading through the book of Mark, because I'm going to, because of what's in the gospel being read today, and doing my first ever terrifying sermon upstairs. So it's considered war literature by some people, and I thought about, it made me think about that time in our history as a kind of a war time. And although I spent a lot of time looking at two riots in the 90s, it's still a different type of a war than that, because those were flashes that were shut down right away, that stopped right away, that subsided. And so that what you talk about of people being willing to come back the next day is very powerful, because even how many of us are willing to stop shopping for a day? I mean, let's forget about having your head cracked open. Not forget about it, but let's call that one thing, right? But how many of us are really willing to do things in our lives to adjust some of the ways that we live, even in terms of natural resources, that don't require violence, but require not even sacrifice, just an adjustment. And so I would need to be with a sociologist, I guess, to understand what that type of the will for change. I'm not so sure if it's here. Now, if we were with some of the Occupy people, they would be very disappointed in us not understanding or noting what's going on there. I was interested when I looked at some of the footage in Egypt at Tahrir Square. I wonder if you noticed this, that those young people are using the rhythm of the music of American hip-hop.
Excellent.
And it's as if American hip-hop, which is a form of protest here, but surrounded also with a kind of commercialism and celebrity culture and again, if Jay-Z were here, he would make another sort of very profound statement about that. But nonetheless, is it that here gets tied up in materialism and consumerism as a part of the so-called protest, but it's being used elsewhere for another purpose, which is another type of true purpose, another type of purpose, which is the kind of determination you're talking about to come back and again and again and again. Do you think it's because the circumstances here are not grave enough? Or is it because we are living in segregated communities and therefore we don't have that many opportunities to see how grave it is for some people, and those people are themselves without the resources to make their plight known?
You raise a question that I try not to answer, because then I'd have to assume my responsibility in trying to do more to get those voices heard. It's very difficult in today's society, which is controlled so much by what we get through electronic means or internet means, to have an impact one way or the other. Here, I had only contend with 4 networks, and so if you could get your network, if it was leading, and you could get people who were of somewhat liberal thinking, then you could tell those stories. It's much harder to get that kind of solid, continuing cry of anguish or demand for justice, or whatever you want to call it, presented on a daily basis to a mixture of people, because we're so stratified. And you can't create change when everybody's in an individual silo.
Which we can all be in because of how we get our information now through our, affinity groups. Do you think when I went on the campaign trails for with actually Clinton and Dole and wrote a play called House Arrest and a book called Talk to Me, I was very shocked to the extent to which maybe this is just the press in Washington. They themselves are very invested in upper middle class lives. They made more money at that time. Many of their children were in private schools. Most of their children were going to Ivy League schools. And so that idea of the journalist as a person like you who's sort of outside and inside at the same time, I thought, they're all inside.
Well, you're sorry to say, quite right. I mean, when I came into the newsroom at KPIX in 1967, I dare say 80% of the people lived in Marin. The few that didn't live in Marin lived in the city. But they had a community, and they all knew one another. They played tennis on Saturday together. So I truly was the outsider. But I took that as another way and another lesson to learn how to eat quiche, how to learn to play tennis. Things of that sort. Consider them educational when they were for.
But also you had a very, and I'm afraid we have to finish in a minute because I'd love to go on talking for several more hours, but also, Belva, you point to the ways in your book, I think, in which your particular position in that environment enabled you to raise issues that people just hadn't thought about as news issues, which you've done brilliantly.
That's the real blessing.
We can't stop without her saying something about Howard Thurman, right?
Absolutely, that's